What is up, my friends? Welcome back to coverage of Face-to-Face Edmonton, Canada's regional championship here on the west side of the country. My name's Haiyue. I'm here with Alexander Hayne. We're going to be bringing you today's action all the way through from the last few rounds of Swiss into the top 8 until we crown a champion. And Alex, so now for something a little bit different. So we've been seeing a lot of mid-range, a lot of Rakdos, we saw some mono green, but the next feature match coming up is a little bit from left field, or should we say from Lotus Field, with Paul de Blois. Tell us about how this combo deck works.
So basically, with Lotus Field, you want to get the namesake card into play. The Lotus Field, you just sacrifice 2 lands. You're not doing anything fancy with that. But then you often want to copy it with Thespian Stage, which that one you don't have to sacrifice 2 lands. And then using things like Vizier, Hidden Strings, Pour Over the Pages, you get to untap those lands, make a bunch of mana, and you kind of get to go off. Usually, let's say, casting an Emergent Ultimatum with a mana floating has a bunch of different lines that end up winning, usually through Omniscience, and then Chandra looping with Balaged Recovery can kill people.
Okay.
There's a lot of convoluted, complex lines, but the main thing is you're using Lotus Field and to produce a lot of mana to go through your deck, and a bunch of tutors, a bunch of card draw, and you pull something together from there.
All right. Well, it looks like Paul is currently at 8-2-1, so still very much alive for the top 8 slot. Let's go and look at his opponent. It's Nick Newburg, and Nick has Abzan Greasefang. So another pretty synergistic deck, shall we say, even if it's not necessarily a combo in that sense.
Yeah, so with the Greasefang deck, they're trying to fill their graveyard ideally with Parhelion, but sometimes just Sky Sovereign, and then play Greasefang, Akiba Boss, to bring it back, crew it, and then smack. And really, sometimes Liliana can discard it again for another go, but usually just getting one Parhelion hit is enough to put your opponent in the bin and the angels left over finishes them off. You have a bunch of disruption like Thoughtseize and some removal to go with it, and it can be a bit of a scary matchup for the Lotus Field deck because it's faster. The Greasefang can come down turn 3. Sometimes you need to set up more, so it comes down turn 4. Lotus Field is maybe a turn 5 combo deck.
Right.
So we'll see what happens, but should be fun and explosive at least.
Okay, well, let's go down to the action and find out. Nick, by the way, at 8-3. So really, I think for Nick, really, really needing the win here to keep the top 8 hopes alive. And then for Paul, a little bit more breathing room, but still not a lot of breathing room. Certainly both players really wanting to hold on to their chances. It's going to be Thoughtseize for Nick Newburg. Finds Impulse. There is a Lotus Field in hand. There's Otawara, Beseju, and I think that's the Satyr that untaps lands.
Yeah, Voyaging Satyr. It's kind of can substitute for being a second Lotus Field in Thespian Stage, because with Hidden Strings you can untap it and the Lotus Field, and then that gives you effectively 6 mana.
Great. So what do you take here? The Impulse or the Satyr?
So a lot of that depends if Nick has a removal spell like Fatal Push in hand. The Satyr definitely speeds Paul up a lot, but the Impulse, finds something to do with all this mana. Usually, though, with the Lotus Field deck, it's best to take the mana sources rather than the things to do with it. There's so many powerful cards to be able to cast once you hit a lot of mana.
All right, so we're going to go over to Paul's turn. We're going to see some setup here. We know that Impulse is available. And for Nick Newburg, the priority is maybe Disruption. We've seen a little bit of that already. And now we're going to see him try to get some... Maybe try and get some of these vehicles into the graveyard ready for the reanimate. Or maybe not. Let's find out.
Nick decides to pass, probably holding up a Grizzly Salvage based off of, considering casting something and not. Interestingly, yeah. It's
I was
interesting that
gonna
Paul played
say,
the Boseiju on his turns, which can be a disruptive element for the Greasefang deck, though doesn't really buy you more than one turn.
I guess it just puts it right back in the graveyard. So
Yeah.
I think Paul did have an Otawara in hand as well, so that could
Yes.
represent another piece of disruption for any big vehicles that come out. Impulse is
Absolutely.
getting resolved. And Nick Newburg, maybe with Grizzly Salvage, the Golgari Impulse in hand.
Yeah, both players doing their own versions of digging. Looks like well, we're going to see if Grizzly Salvage can find, let's say, a Greasefang or a land to cast it, and a a nice graveyard vehicle. We could be moving on pretty quickly to another game, but
Meanwhile, Paul de Blois is floating the mana, so one green and one blue available, sacking those lands to the Lotus Field. There is a Vizier of Tumbling Sands is getting cycled. That's going to untap the Lotus Field. So you start to see some wheels start to turn. And what can Paul find here?
yeah, I mean, usually you want to save your Viziers for your combo turn because they provide initial 1 mana. But looks like Paul is getting back Boseiju.
And there it is, Grizzly Salvage. Yeah, Boseiju was put back in hand for Paul, and 2 Grease Fangs found. No Parhelion from Grizzly Salvage.
So it looks like Nick needed the Greasefang, taking one of those two, right? So probably already has the third land, but looking for some way to put one of these vehicles into the yard.
Okay, well there's Concealed Courtyard. So that enables the Grease Fang to be played out. And it seems like Nick is pretty content to just play it out. There's not a lot of interaction from this Lotus Field deck at this stage of the game.
Yeah, mainly, we saw the Otawara and Boseiju. Those are the main things in game one. There's also the Chandra, of course, that could kill it, but it's not really a deck full of removal spells. And really, this might, we don't know what is in Paul's hand, but getting back Boseiju instead of getting back, let's say, Impulse or Vizier is a strong indicator that he probably already has something good going on.
Yeah, with a Bloom Command now for Nick. And that's going to be milling 3 cards. Mills a Parhelion. So there is one found. And then you can return a land card from your graveyard to your hand. So that's the with the Bloom Command ability resolving. I think Drain for 2 was the other mode that we saw.
So we'll see if Paul is forced into using his Otawara here. It buys a fair bit of time, but he also, might be willing to take the hit and then go off next turn. It's
pretty interesting spot here for Paul. Is going to use that Otawara.
Yeah.
As you said, prevent the reanim. Wait. Okay, so I guess the players had gone to combat. The trigger was on the stack, and then Paul.
Yeah, so you have to return. The way Greasefang works is at the beginning of your combat, you return target vehicle. It's not a May. So
Right.
So he waits for him to return the vehicle and then bounces the Greasefang so that the Greasefang can't crew it, and then the vehicle gets returned to hand at end step. So it's back in Nick's hand now. Really nice play from Paul.
Yeah, some excellent timing there from Paul de Blois, just really identifying how to put the most for the strongest breaks, shall we say, on this Parhelion. And yeah, Greasefang in hand, Parhelion in hand, there are ways to discard it, right? There's Rafine's Informant, Scrapbook Mutt, Liliana, as you said. There are ways for Nick Newburg to put the vehicle back in the graveyard, but this certainly sets him back a couple of turns. And now back over to Paul de Blois, who is impulsing with the Lotus Field mana, one floating.
Yeah, probably we'll see a follow-up of land and turn Thespian Stage into Lotus Field with the idea of next turn going off. And Nick has a fair bit of assembling to do. So yeah, we do see there's now 2 Lotus Fields. That's 7 with a land drop, 8 mana available for Paul next turn. Not to mention with any untap effects. Let's say Pour Over the Pages is +1 mana, Hidden Strings is +4 mana. There's a lot of stuff can happen next turn. So we'll see what Nick can come up with.
Okay, so we know that he has the Greasefang in hand. We know that he has the Parhelion in hand. There are no vehicles in the graveyard other than the one that was taken out. Is there a way? There is not a way. And it's a pass back over to Paul de Blois, who gets to untap 7 mana available right now. Oh, you can see the relief. And maybe he wasn't necessarily expecting this, but okay, talking himself through it. Yeah, well, I'm not sure.
Doing some math in his head, probably. There's a lot of math to do with Lotus Field. You have to count all your mana. All right, Pour with 1 blue floating.
Okay, sure. That's gonna draw some cards and gets to discard an extra Lotus Field. Untap 2 lands. So 1 blue floating. Now 8 available.
So most of your spells in the deck are blue, but Emergent Ultimatum is triple green. So it's always important to remember to float the right colors. It's not each of your lands produce 3, so you need 1 on tap really to do Emergent Ultimatum, often with a black floating, but you'd rather have blue floating it makes some of your combo lines easier. Though usually when you have 2 Lotus Fields, it's pretty easy.
All right, so I think that's another copy of Pour. So going up 1 mana again.
Right, but the mana showing, is that showing 2 blue floating or?
I think it's showing floating? 3 floating.
Should be 3 blue floating makes sense. Should be 3 mana floating right now because Paul's added 1 from the Boseiju and then gained 1 from each Pour.
Right. Now there's 4 floating. Is that another Pour? The third Pour?
Yeah, so, but it looked like Paul drew a 4th card by accident.
Oh, I see. Okay. It looks like we are going to have a bit of a judge call. So I think that we're going to come back to the booth for just a second because thanks to the magic of post-production, we can skip sitting through this judge call. But yes, what happened really there was that Paul accidentally drew 4 cards off that Pour Over the Pages. You're only supposed to draw 3. And when that is resolved by the judge staff that they have down there in the feature match area, we're going to come and rejoin the action pretty shortly. We'll be able to bring that to you very soon. And I believe that the resolution is that they're just going to put the extra card back. So we're rejoining the action. Pour Over the Pages now resolving properly. Here's the discard. And untap the 2 lands, 4 mana floating. And what did Paul find? Is there a way to kill from here? I mean, do these decks really ever fizzle?
They do sometimes fizzle, but after resolving 3 Pour Over the Pages, it's probably more likely that Paul loses by being hit by an asteroid.
Oh my goodness. Is the Parhelion an asteroid? Roughly the same size, right? It's coming from the sky.
So we'll see. I think one of the things is that because of Emergent Ultimatum searches your deck for spells, it's bad to have some of those cards in your hand. Uh,
Right.
but if you a skilled Lotus player can really manage around that and find the right piles. Sometimes you don't even need to resolve an ultimatum. Uh, it just often makes things faster and easier.
So we did see Dark Petition get cast. That is going to find something, and it did, of course, have Spell Mastery. So here is Emergent Ultimatum with the
It's like one black floating.
black floating. Yep. Okay, and now, so how does this like actually kill from here?
So
Like actually
okay,
take Nick to zero?
so so I mean the final loop is with Chandra. Chandra doubles the first spell you cast from it. It doubles one spell each turn. It's the first one cast, but it triggers every time there's a new it comes into play, right? So how it works is you with Balaged Recovery, when you get three Balaged Recoveries, you have Chandra has one gets copied, returns two from your graveyard. So then you have your hand has two Balaged Recoveries. You minus the Chandra to do 5 damage to them. Then you recovery back Chandra, play recovery, copied, returning two recoveries, and you therefore have a loop. Of course,
Right.
you need omniscience in play to do this, but it's not that hard to generate 10 mana to even hard cast an omniscience, and you can tutor for one. Liar, which Paul is finding here, lets you cast all of your uh, graveyard spells again. Basically, they all have
Yeah.
flashback,
Yeah.
and that makes it really really easy to go off.
Okay, so it is going to be Chandra, Leah, and at the fourth pour of the pages are the choices. And Nick Newburg, of course, gets to choose one of these, which shuffles back into the library, and the other two are cast without paying their mana costs. A little shake of the head there from Paul de Blois. Does this choice of cards tell you anything about his hand?
Yeah, a little bit. So one of the more common choices is to find omniscience, behold the beyond, and the third card probably would be something that makes mana like a pour over the pages or hidden strings. So that you want to force your opponent not to give you omniscience, or if they give you omniscience when you have a bunch of cards like this, it's easy. And then with behold the beyond, you can tutor for basically whatever you need. Usually liar and some hidden strings to make a bunch of mana, play liar, and play tutors again. Uh, yeah, here
So
without the Chandra in play, this is relatively easy because now there's tons of mana, and yeah, and
okay, that's gonna do it. Nick Newman packs it up. He's seen enough. Portapla is gonna advance to 1-0. Needs one more game to lock up this one. This round number 12, I believe. Sorry, just gotta get my maths
yes.
right in my mind. Round number 12 clash between them. Let's have a look at the sideboard. Is there a lot to bring in here for Greasebank?
So the cards I would look to bring in for sure. Liliana the Veil wants to come in. Uh, it's disruptive both for making them discard cards, and the Lotus Field deck makes good use of resources, but also if they have things like Voyaging Satyr, it's an incidental removal spell, and you can cut your removal spells up that you were otherwise playing. Though it looks like there's no fatal pushes in the main deck for Nick's list. Um, Something like Unlicensed Hearse is also a reasonable inclusion, especially because of the Chandra kill. Some graveyard hate can be disruptive, though it's easy to play around with a Boseiju. Um,
Yeah,
but I
pretty
think I would still
interesting
bring it in.
option. Okay. All right. So unlicensed has maybe a bit of graveyard disruption. Let's have a look at the Lotus Field deck and see what tools are available. I see Ugin, Chandra, Dragonlord, Dramoka 2 copies. So some different and extra top end potentially.
Yeah, we could see a second top end piece maybe come in. Of course, you know there's there's often a lot of ways to win with the Lotus Field deck. For instance, Lair of the Hydra can be a win condition. When you make enough mana, you can copy with Thespian Stage and then tap down all their blockers with Hidden Strings. But the card I'm really looking to see come in is Pithing Needle. Being able to name Parhelion, for example, or even Liliana the Veil, can be really, really good and just buy you tons of time.
Okay, fantastic. Let's go to the action. Game number 2 now between these two players. Nick Newburg with Greasefang is on the play this time. Vessel of Nascency comes down on 1, and we're back over to Paul. And, we've saw this Lotus Field combo deck really do its thing last time. Let's see whether we can see Greasefang do its thing this time.
Oh, there's the needle.
Oh, okay. So that did come in from the sideboard. Maybe, do you think in the dark just naming the Parhelion?
That's what I would guess that it's naming, but I could see perhaps naming Liliana, but yeah, yeah.
It is Parhelion. Yeah, and Vessel of Nascency is getting cracked. Finds a Liliana.
Notably, Paul didn't play a second land. There are some hands, especially on the draw with the Lotus Field deck, that you keep with that aren't one landers, but they're effectively one landers because you have Lotus Field as your other land, and you can't play
Right.
it unless you have 2 lands to sacrifice. So I would
I
imagine
see.
that Paul probably has Lotus Field in hand, but requires one more land to first to be able to get it going.
Liliana comes down, and the hand attack is beginning. Nick is discarding a land, and it looks like, is that a Hidden Strings being discarded there for Paul? I think
Yes, it
so.
is. Yeah, and it's always interesting to discard Hidden Strings because it's one of the cards that gives you the most speed, but is doesn't give you cards. So it is something if I was low on resources that I would want to keep.
Oh, Esika's Chariot for Nick Newberg gets spell pierced. And that does not feel great, but Nick gets his discard of Helion, which is currently under the Pithing Needle, and Paul discards a Sasa. No land yet again for Paul de Blois, and even though he's doing a good job of keeping things under check, it does not seem like, it seems like he probably needs some mana soon, right?
Yeah, he definitely does, and I mean this Liliana is ticking up to ultimate, which isn't actually that threatening here because Paul has so few permanents, but
Yeah.
just
Like, I don't know if you're ulting Liliana when your opponent just has the one land.
no, but it is threatening if Nick does find Greasefang Parhelion. He then can ultimate the Liliana and make Paul choose land or needle. But mostly, I think Liliana is just going to be Paul discards a card every turn.
Well, they are both certainly going to be discarding the cards.
Yeah. One of the big weaknesses of Lotus Field as a deck is that when you have your fail rate, your deck just doesn't do anything at all. Whereas, let's say Greasefang, Nick's deck isn't really doing what he wants to do either, but at least he's got a 3/2 creature in play that can attack, right?
Right.
So,
There's a reasonable plan B.
yes.
Oh, but there is Beseiju. That's going to find a Borograzer. That's going to allow a Borograzer, which puts the Lotus Field into play, sacking 2 lands. Paul de Blois now has access to 3 mana, still not as much as you would necessarily want at this stage of the game, but it's not nothing.
It's definitely not nothing, and Paul is lower on resources from it looks like 3 cards in hand, so it's very hard to win from there. But it is possible to win with just one Lotus Field, and
That was Traverse to find Greasefang, and I think even though Parhelion is under the needle, there is a Chariot in the graveyard.
yeah, that Chariot is going to do work because next turn Liliana can again discard it, and it can come back again from the Greasefang. It's a lot of damage. So Paul's really under a lot of pressure here.
For sure. Comes in, makes those cats as well. Greasefang is going to jump into the Chariot. It's going to be an attack in for 7 and gets to copy a cat. Grazer thinking about jumping in front of the Chariot here.
Yeah, it seems like you're not going to get a better deal than blocking 4 damage. Uh, maybe you can block 2 damage over 2 turns, but that's seems unlikely.
Yeah, and Liliana returns a chariot to hand, but also discarded a chariot. It was a different chariot, but
Yeah, there's a second chariot.
there's another chariot. So that makes sense. Okay, so Liliana up to 7. Paul still just with the Lotus Field with the pithing needle, counting up the damage. It's gonna be a lot. I mean, next turn there's 6 from the cats, 3, 9, 13 total just from what's available on board.
Yeah, and then there's also the chariot that's going to bring 2 cats and then be crewed, which is another 4 damage. So that's 17 damage. Paul's at 17. Something has to happen here, and
Yeah. Something did happen, and it was the scoop. So Nick Newburg even things up. Paul Blois really stuck on mana there, not able to find the lands that he needed. We're gonna go to a game number 3, and I think we can just very quickly look at the deck again. There's probably not a lot of difference between play and draw here, or is there?
Not too much. I mean, we saw that Paul brought in Spell Pierce, and it was actually kind of nice. But one of the things with the Lotus Field deck is, other than Lotus Field, you don't actually have necessarily that many blue sources. So Spell Pierce is kind of tough to cast sometimes.
That's true. All right, let's go down to the action, find out what is going to be happening here between these two decks. We saw Lotus Field really get to go off in game number 1, and then game number 2 re-dominated by Nick Newburg with Abs and Greasefang. And here's that duress on turn number 1. We get to look, oh, it was a 5-card hand for Paul Blois, and Vizier of Tumbling Sands, Lotus Field, Boseiju, plus that Sanctum. No hidden strings now after the duress. Needs to find something, but Vizier can at least cycle to look at some more cards.
Yeah, and usually these hands where you just have a couple lands in Lotus Field are pretty solid, and looks like Paul's
What if
probably
he
going to
just
find a Thespian
Sky?
stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you can assemble your mana, there's a lot of cards in your deck that you can draw. You know, we've seen the power of, you can't Thoughtseize the top of the deck, and Lotus Field is maybe even more true of that than mono green. But
for sure,
it's going to be about if Nick can put Paul under enough pressure so that he doesn't have time to find something good.
Okay, so Nick finds Mana Confluence. That's going to be is that Mana Confluence? Yeah, it's Mana Confluence. Just that's going to be the land for turn. And then with the Bloom Command, starts the milling, Chariot, and Informant.
No land.
Finds. Yeah, no land. But there is now a vehicle in the graveyard, at least.
Yeah, so even though it's no Parhelion, just returning Chariot is still a pretty good clock if Nick has a Greasefang next turn. Because Paul probably is priced this in this turn to play his Lotus Field, next turn into copying it, and then the turn after that, doing something, going off. And, probably returning Chariot isn't quite enough clock to beat that, but if Nick has another piece of disruption, it might be.
Now, Paul can play that Lotus Field this turn, has the Vizier that we know about, has a Thespian stage that we know about. So let's see what it's going to be. Oh, Needle first.
I would guess Chariot is going to be the name here, just because that's the one that's in the yard. Liliana of the Veil.
Liliana of the Veil. Okay. Interesting.
So maybe Paul's valuing protecting the cards in hand pretty highly. One interesting play Paul, of course, could have done is playing the Vizier off of the Thespian stage last turn, but that would walk into Liliana pretty hard. So it seems like Paul is really respecting the Liliana.
Let's see what Nick has going on. Of course, we don't have access to the player's hand, so if it is Liliana, it could be pretty bad here for Nick, but takes another damage from the Mana Confluence. Goes back down to 18. And it's Greasefang. That's going to find the chariot. Paul de Blood did not name Eska's chariot, even though it was in the graveyard. And here we go. Jumps in the cat carriage, makes another cat, and chariot's going to be coming back to the hand. But this one isn't as problematic if you just need to cast it again.
Yeah. Well, and this is just quite a bit of pressure. I mean, right? Paul's at 14 now. There's at least 10 on the board. If Nick has a way to discard that chariot next turn, that's lethal.
Right. There's 10 on the board already, and then yeah, the chariot adds another 4, so you're right. Can Paul find anything? There was a Beseju, it got pitched, so there's no Beseju, at least that we know of, in hand. We do know about the Vizier, and I think that's the only thing that we know about left. So Paul, I think, really stimmied with that mulligan to 5 that he faced, and then Thoughtseize as well. Does not have a way of discarding the chariot. It's going to be 10.
Could be that Nick has a Lily out of the Veil, but that Paul's got it shut down.
Yeah. Certainly could be
the players are laughing, maybe about Liliana.
Yeah.
What was there, Beseju happening here? Oh, Assassin's
it's a trophy. Okay.
Ooh, so Paul may be getting a little punished for deciding not to do this on his turn.
Yeah. Yeah, that Lotus, that Thespian stage does not have hexproof until it becomes the Lotus Field. So here it is, the trophy. And that's going to take down the stage. The land does come in untapped. But nothing to do with the mana.
Yeah, this makes it a lot harder for Paul to go off here. I think with 2 Lotuses, it's you have a reasonable chance, but with 1, it requires a lot more to go right.
Okay, well, 4 mana is floating. That's the cycle, we believe, from the Vizier, untapping the Lotus. So keeping 2 mana floating. Yep. Oh, and that's going to do it!
Wow.
Not enough juice for the engine, and Nick Newburg with Abs and Greasefang is going to take this one down against Paul de Blois, and you can see how much it means to the players there. Yeah. I mean, Paul going to be at 8-4-1 now. Top 8 hopes maybe not necessarily live anymore. Nick Newburg just keeping it in there with 9-3 with a little bit more magic to go. Wow. Okay, that was some stuff that we saw happen.
Oh yeah, definitely some stuff. I mean, it was still really close there. Could it? Because looked like Paul almost had enough, but we get to see both halves of the combo life, right? You get to see going off, drawing a bunch of cards with pour over the pages. The world is your oyster. You get to see Parhelion coming in. Actually, we didn't see that at all, but we saw the cat car being enough. The cat
car was pretty good. All right, okay, so that's going to do it from round number 11. There are 30 rounds of Swiss today, so we do have 2 more to go. And that means we're going to go in for a quick break. We're going to come back straight into the action with round number 12 after these messages.